Welcome to the Pursuit of Constant Improvement podcast, and in today's episode, I'm going to be sharing my story, how I have built a life that I dreamt of, and I'm only 26 years old. Now, I've just realised that this is something that I've not really went into much depth on before. I make all this content and just assume for people to know my story. I think you'll imagine, like, when you think of your own journey, you just assume other people aren't interested in it. However, I'm sure there's some of you that probably want to know a little bit more about how I've got to the position I'm in today. Maybe you're just interested in how my life's been. There's been a lot that's happened. Obviously, I make the title of the fact that I've built my dream life at 26 years old. That is no clickbait. I'm not saying that to get your attention. I'm saying that because that is the truth. I have built a life by design. I have built a life that I love. I'm truly incredibly proud of myself, the things that I've built. And all of that came from my pursuit of constant improvement. At 19 years old, when I committed to living a life of self-improvement. And I'm going to tell you the story about how that happened, how I got to that stage, how I got to where I am today. I want to start off in the present moment. Right now, I am sitting talking to a camera in a studio in Bali. I'm at the other side of the world. Of course, I was born and raised in Scotland in a small town called Lanark. Now, over the past year of my life, I have made ridiculous amounts of change, huge changes in my life. Some of those changes allowed me to live a life where I can travel. I now live 3 or 4 months of the year at least. It's coming up on 6 months in total that I've lived in Asia, between Thailand and Bali. And the reason I do that is because that's the type of life I want to live. So I built a life that allowed me to do that. Now, of course, today I'm in Bali. I have a mind, a body, and a business that I'm incredibly proud of. I have friends that I love. I have a relationship that I adore. All of these things I built. So to get to this stage, I'm going to talk you through my journey and where that all started. So we'll come back to that at the end. But in the beginning, I want to talk about my early days. So of course, I'm 26 years old. Now, when I was younger, I've been very lucky to grow up with incredible parents. Both of my parents are amazing. They are still together. I know how much of an impact that has in people's lives in terms of their parents. They're the two people that probably impact us most in life. Our early stages are when we learn and grow the most. So having two incredible parents is something that I'm forever grateful for. My dad was a manager for BT. He worked for BT. My mum was a receptionist at a health centre. So they both had normal jobs. Like, we never came from like money or anything like that. But in saying that, like, my dad has done everything he can to provide me with a life that is a good life. We've never had to, or at least I've never had to, worry about things in terms of financial aspect when I was younger. So these things I all owe to my parents. They brought me up with care, with love. And I think that's played a huge role in allowing me to become the type of man that I am today. Because as I said, our early years really impact us from there. Now, I went to a pretty good school. The school that I went to was around the corner from me, just a normal school. Obviously, like any school, you get good and bad from it. It was right next to my house. When I went to school, I was, in the beginning, very, very shy, all throughout primary school and into secondary school as well. I was shy, I was small. Now, genetically, you've probably heard people were classed as ectomorphs, endomorphs, everything like that. I am your typical ectomorph. I am skinny, I was small. I was always the smallest boy in my year for years, all throughout primary school, then even into high school. I was incredibly skinny, and throughout school that led to, as happens to most guys, bullying. You get bullied. Because I was small, tall boys would push me around, I would get beat up. My mum, I remember, she had to go into the school so many times because I was being bullied, because I was shy, because I wasn't wanting to go into school and all these things. And the reason I tell you that is because the man I am today is the exact opposite of that. I am someone who's filled with confidence. I have a physique I'm incredibly proud of. I have learned how to fight. I've trained martial arts for years. All of these things that I've achieved in my life have come through something in my childhood. So the fact that I was small and skinny and got bullied, I hate that. You'll know this from your own life. Anything that you experience negatively in your youth, you hate as an adult. Like, for example, if I see somebody getting bullied, I can't stand it because I know what it feels like. So these early I'm so grateful that I got bullied, because these are the things that shaped my reality. Maybe I wouldn't have had the ambition to learn how to fight when I was older if I didn't go through that quote-unquote struggle of being bullied and feeling useless. That's what I felt like. Now, of course, that was primary school. Other than that, I'm not going to tell you that I had a horrible, horrible time. I didn't particularly enjoy school. I was always very shy. But once I got out of primary school and I went to high school, it was the same throughout both of them. I was always in the bottom classes. I think because of my shyness, I really just, sat back. I didn't listen. And because of that, I came across as being for lack of better words, thick as shit. Like, I was in the bottom classes of everything, so if you knew me back then as a child, you wouldn't think I would have amounted to much, because I never showed any signs of that. Now, going into high school, I continued to get bullied a little bit, first and second year, just because I was small and I was skinny. However, that developed into my first passion. When I was in third year, my brother, I'm so thankful for it, he took me to the gym, and that's where my first passion for weight training grew, which has literally changed my life. Now, just to go back a little bit, I started to thrive at the age of 15. So up until that stage, I was very shy. I was always the smallest and skinniest in my year. I then started to grow a little bit, both like in height, but also in confidence. I started to realise that I was maybe like a little bit funny, so I would act the class clown a little bit. And I grew into quite a charismatic boy. Like at 14, 15, I think like if you went back to school and asked my teachers, they'd probably say, yeah, it wasn't really fucking much. He was pretty stupid, but yeah, he was pretty charismatic, like, you know, like to be social and things like that. So I grew from what you'd think was an introverted child into an extrovert. I'm very much an extroverted person. I love people. So I got to this stage at around 15 years old where I socially started to do pretty well. I had a decent group of friends. I wouldn't say I was popular, but I was friends with people who were. So like I was doing pretty well in terms of social circles. So school was good for me. Like I didn't perform well at all, and I left school with little to no qualifications, but socially it helped me thrive as a human. It helped me develop skills that I now have today. So that stage of my life, things were starting to go well, and like I said, that is when I started weight training. At 15 years old, I started going to the gym because for years, my biggest insecurity was how I look and how I feel. I hated being skinny. If you're a guy listening to this, you know what it feels like. You want to be a provider. You want to feel capable. That's what you want. You want to feel like people can look at you and think, fuck, that guy takes care of himself. Like, fucking, I wouldn't want to fuck with that guy. That's what we all think. It might be our ego, but it's deep-rooted into us as men. And I was no different. I wanted to be muscular. I remember like watching like TV programs and stuff, like my favourite wrestlers, my favourite footballer was this guy who used to play for Man United. He was called Louise Nani. And he was pretty good. He used to do backflips, which I thought was cool, but he was shredded. He had a six-pack, he had like muscular arms, whatever. He looked class. And I always remember that was one of the reasons why he was my favourite, because I just looked at him and I thought, oh my God, that guy looks so cool. So I think it genuinely was deep-rooted in me from a young age that I wanted to be muscular. I wanted to go to the gym and do all these things. So when my brother asked me to come with him at 15, that kick-started it all. So that was one of the biggest moments in my life was, getting to that stage where I absolutely loved weight training. Now that was at 15 years old. So one of the big first moments in my life was starting my first passion of weight training because of what that evolved into in later life. My second big thing that happened to me was I'd maybe been weight training for a year. I was just about to turn 16, I think, and we had exams. Now, in fourth year in secondary school in Scotland, that's when you set your first group of exams. Everybody goes off on study leave. You get 4 weeks off. Everybody just does what they want, and then obviously you set your exams. I was one of about 10 to 15 people in my year group, bearing in mind there was probably close to 200 people in that year group, who did not set any exams. So what had happened was you could be at what was called a National 5 level, you would set an exam, or a National 4. Most people had 5, 4, 3, or maybe 2 National 5s. I had none. Because I wasn't smart enough. I was failing all my prelims and I just wasn't. So what happened was all of my friends went off on study leave and I had to go into school. Now the reason I say this was a huge defining moment in my life is because it's when I felt at I don't want to say my lowest, but I felt my most worthless, I would say. I remember going into school, nobody in my year group, 4th, 5th and 6th year was all off, and I was in. I turned up to one of my classes, my teacher was like, what are you doing here? You're on study leave. I'm like, no, I don't have any exams. And she couldn't believe it. She said, what do you mean you don't have any exams? Because like it wasn't normal to not have exams. Now, this was like, I felt terrible. I felt, like I said, worthless. I felt stupid. And that, I think, was the kick that I needed, because I realised, like, holy shit, if I keep doing this, like, I'm not going to end up anywhere in life. I'm going to end up, will I even get a job? Like, what will I do? I had no idea what I wanted to do at the time. So I remember I went to my pupil support teacher at the time and I said, I don't want to come into school. I'm the only one in the classes. I feel like an idiot. I hate this. And he said, listen, I will let you have the month off if you promise me one thing, that over the next month you go to the gym and you go and play golf every day. He just wanted me to stay busy, because he knew golf was something that my dad tried to encourage me to do, kept me busy, kept me away from sitting playing my Xbox. And he knew that me going to the gym was a passion, because I'd been going for, let's say, 6 months. I'd started to build a little bit of muscle and it was really helping my confidence. So that moment there was huge for me. It really defined, I was like, holy shit, it was my first realization of like, I need to get my act together here, because it made me realize that I want to do better. So probably the first time in my life, I realized that I actually maybe had ambition deep down. I also had my first job around that time. I worked in a shop. This shop was just a relatively small shop down the bottom of the high street in Lanark where I live. Most of my friends worked in this shop. Like, everybody got jobs there because they were really busy. So a lot of guys my age worked there. I got sacked after a month. I got sacked working a job literally behind a till because I wasn't good enough at it. I wasn't fast enough at it. He sacked me through a letter. I remember that. I got a letter posted through my door. But yeah, funny experience. But my first job, and I got sacked after a month just because I generally wasn't good enough. Like, I was too slow. I just wasn't capable. So I would have sacked me too. And yeah, that again was a moment of like, holy shit, I can't even hold down the most basic job. So at this time, I started really realizing like, I do want to do better than this. I don't want to be this stupid guy. Because my friends would have jokes with me all the time, like about how I didn't sit exams. I remember even before that, in like third year and second year, my two best friends at the time used to talk about how they would go to uni together. And I was never in that conversation because they would laugh at me. They knew I wasn't going to go to uni because I couldn't. I just wasn't smart enough. So it was a well-known fact that I wasn't smart. Now, in sixth year, I had been dropped from most of my subjects because I wasn't going to be capable of sitting a higher exam. I sat a higher exam for two subjects, history, which I got a C, that's the only higher qualification I got, and P, I got a D. Essentially, I failed it, which is pretty crazy to think. Now, in that time, my last 2 months of school, obviously you're thinking, what do you want to do? Can't get into uni, like no courses are going to let me in with one higher, which I didn't even have at the time. So I started looking in a website. I remember I was in business class, which by the way, I'd been kicked out of. I wasn't allowed to sit the exam in business because I wasn't good enough. So what they done was they sent me to a computing class. Now in that computing class, I searched through courses, because that's what they told me to do, look at college courses. So I looked at one and I seen health, fitness and exercise. And I thought, fuck, I've really been enjoying the gym for the past couple of years. I'm loving it. Because what I found I was doing is I was actually researching it by myself. I wanted to understand, like on a cellular level, how muscle growth worked. I wasn't satisfied with just knowing, oh, you go, you lift weights, you get bigger. I'd like to know why it happened. That was the first time in my life I ever had a deep interest for something, was weight training. So I found myself researching this in my spare time, and I seen this college course. I was like, do you know what? I could do that. I could go to college and I could study that. Maybe I could be a gym instructor. So I done that. Now, at that time, right before I left for college, I started the job as a lifeguard. So I worked as a lifeguard at my local swimming pool. And yeah, I went to college, and my goal was to be a gym instructor. I thought, oh my God, I could get qualified in this. I'd do a year or 2 years at college. I'll be a gym instructor and I'll work in a gym. That'd be cool. That's what I wanted to do at the time. That's how far my ambition went. So if you had to go back and tell 18, 19-year-old Connor they'd be living in Bali, he would make his money through an online business that he's built, he would literally impact people's lives, change people's lives through his self-improvement coaching, there's not a chance on earth I would have believed you. But anyway, this is just part of the story. Now, at the age of 18 and 19, this was self-discovery for me. This was my self-improvement really starting to be discovered. This is the stage when I discovered that. So first thing I started to do was when I went to college, I had to have assignments that had to be submitted. I had obviously shifts as a lifeguard that I had to complete. So I started using a diary. That was one of the first steps to me actually in self-improvement. So I didn't really plan my weeks. I just put in things into this calendar, which was me living with more intention already, with more structure, which was more than most people were doing. Now, another thing I done was I stumbled across a guy on Instagram who showed his lifestyle. He was traveling the world. He made money from his phone. Everything a young guy wants, okay? You're probably thinking right now, what did he do? Well, there's multiple options. He either done drop shipping or he traded crypto, but at the time, crypto you didn't really hear about it. He traded Forex. So you probably heard, if you've never heard of it before, Forex is essentially the foreign exchange market. You got the stock market, foreign exchange market, commodities markets, all these different financial instruments that you can trade. Forex is one of them. So these guys will live this dream life, and then they'll show you this lifestyle, and obviously a young guy, like, I want to live that life. So they sell you this course on Forex. Now, I'm not even going to go into the course as such because this is literally the thing that changed my life. Not the skill of Forex trading, but what it done is it showed me I have a deep interest in finance and investing. I wasn't even that bothered about the money or the lifestyle at the time. I just wanted to know more about financial markets. And it taught me that. But the biggest thing that it done is it put me into a group chat. So I think I paid about £150 for this course, which at the time was literally, that's all I had left in my bank. I remember it. I'd been paid, spent most of my money, I had just enough money. I was so nervous about getting scammed. I sent the money and I was like, oh, when do I get access to the course, whatever. Anyway, sent me access to it. I literally just absorbed myself in it. I spent all my spare time reading and researching about this, and I loved it. Now, in that time, I got put into a group chat, because part of the course was you get access to the course and access to this group chat. This group chat was filled with ambitious, disciplined, and optimistic people. People I'd never been around in my life. People who were starting their own businesses, wanted to live this life by design, and all these things. I'd never heard of these things before. So all these people were like, oh, I'm going to this place in this many months, I'm going to live here, I'm building this business, I'm reading this book, I learned this, and I've just been put into this group, and I was amazed by it. Because these people were then saying to me, I remember jumping on a call with a guy, and he's like, what do you want from life? Like, where do you want to live? What do you want to have? And I was like, fuck, I've never been asked this. So this was at the time I really started to question myself. I started to think, what do I actually want from life? So it was a huge moment in my life, because then I started listening to audiobooks, started listening to podcasts, I started reading and wanting to become better. So this is what kick-started my self-improvement to a huge degree. I remember at that time I was in college and I'd got past the stage, I'd qualified as a gym instructor, and I then realised, because I'd been kind of focusing on my self-improvement for about a year, I realised that, right, I'm capable of more here, because I was good at what I'd done. One of my lecturers, I remember he told me after this exam I'd done, he's like, I don't know why you're wanting to leave college, because you could be a personal trainer and you could do well at this. So I took his advice. I went in for a third year of college. At the end of that year, I would qualify as a personal trainer. Now, in that time there, I remember being in a finance class, and in that finance class, they wanted to calculate how much we could earn. And I was like, right, if I charge £25 an hour, which at the time is what I was going to be charging, how much could I earn if I do X amount of hours and I get X amount of clients? And I remember seeing it was like not a crazy amount of hours. I could make $2,500 a month. And I remember at the time thinking, what? I think I was earning 400 or 300 and something as a lifeguard. Obviously, I was only working weekends. I remember thinking, like, that's unbelievable. I could have $2,500 in my bank account. I was blown away by this amount of money. It was crazy. And I remember looking at that and thinking, like, I genuinely don't believe I could do that. I was like, where would I get the clients from? How would they stay for me? What if they leave? What would I do with that money? How would I know what would I do with an accountant? How do I do all this? So this shows you how early I was in my journey. That type of money overwhelmed me, and I had no idea how I'd get to that stage. So that was part of my, obviously, when I kickstarted my self-improvement journey through college. Now, at 20 years old, I finished college, I qualified as a personal trainer, and I was very lucky and fortunate enough to work at a gym in my local town. The gym I worked at was great, really enjoyed it, and it gave me an amazing experience as a personal trainer. I actually worked there for close to 6 years and built my personal training business. Now, when I first started as a personal trainer, I worked for about 8 months. In that 8-month period after that, lockdown hit. The very first lockdown for COVID, of course. In that time, I think I had about 8 to 10 clients or something like that at the time, maybe 15 max. So I was doing relatively decent. I was doing decent at the point. I'd been working for 8 months, and then obviously I couldn't work. Just everything was like shut down. So because I'd been self-employed for less than a year, I hadn't submitted my accounts for my first year, I had no financial support. Now, luckily, I was still living with my parents, I didn't have much expenses, so I just had all this time in my hands and nothing to do. So I was like, right, what do I do? Now, at that time, I'd been really interested in business, because that Forex course, I tried to learn that, and I failed. I invested, I remember, £300 of my money at the time, which was huge, and I lost it all. So I'd failed at that, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do now? I was like, I want to be in business, but I have no idea what business to start. And at that time, I was like, right, I'd always had an idea of starting a clothing brand, because clothing brands are one of the more accessible businesses to start. And saying that, there's a lot to it, but it's pretty simple to an extent. Now, I decided I wanted to start a clothing brand. And when lockdown started, that was when it started for me. I was like, right, I'm going to commit this time, however long we're in lockdown, to building another business. This clothing brand, because I was like, I'd love to have a brand. And I was so nervous to do this, because I thought, well, what will people think of me? Will people say shit? Will people not like it? All of these things. I had all of these limiting beliefs. But I remember I committed to it. I remember I used student loan money. I had 1 year of student loan. I didn't spend any of it. I had it saved, and I spent it on a website. I spent, it was like £1,000 or something like that on a website. So I committed that money to it. I was like, right, the rest of this money from this loan, I am now going to use to start this clothing brand. So that's what I'd done. So over the next 8 months to a year, I built out this clothing brand all throughout lockdown. This is when I started working late nights. I started like just consuming every information I could on learning how to grow a business. And I became obsessed with my own self-improvement, learning how to be a better man, learning more about finance, learning more about business, learning more about branding, all of these things. That's all I done. I didn't drink the whole part. Like, I remember everybody was drinking in lockdown. I didn't drink. I was obsessed with learning more. Now, another significant thing, there's 2 significant things that happened in this time. I started learning more about business, so I joined a networking group, which I was part of for about 3 months, and then it shut down. I loved it, and I joined another one, which at the time was called the Young Entrepreneurs Network. Now, I will get back to that in the end, but just keep that in mind. The network that I joined 5-6 years ago called the Young Entrepreneurs Network, that was something that changed my life forever. So I, again, was a personal trainer, but couldn't work because of COVID, so I started to launch this clothing brand. Now, by the end of COVID, I had it launched. So it was about 1 year in to launching this clothing brand. COVID had kind of been and gone, and then it kept coming back. So I launched this clothing brand. Another good couple of significant things happened in this time. So to launch a clothing brand, I wanted to do it professionally. Everything I do is with intention, and it has been since that age. I wanted to do it well. I didn't want to half-arse it. So I got a full photo shoot. I wanted to get a model done. I used this model. I hired a guy called Dale. He actually ended up going on Love Island, but at the time, I remember going through Instagram, I was looking for these like models. I found this guy, and I'm sure he had 2,000 or 3,000 followers at the time, and I remember looking at him thinking, that guy's cool as fuck. He's literally exactly what I'm looking for. So I remember I messaged him, and I says, hi, I've got a clothing brand I'm starting, I'd love you to model for it. And he said, give me a phone call. And I thought, shit, what am I going to say on the phone? I was so nervous, I was terrified. And I remember phoning him. And he picks up the phone. I'm like, hi, it's Connor, whatever. And he's like, right, tell me a bit about it. And I'm telling him about it, trying to impress him. He's like, right, okay, how much do you want to, like, how much will you pay me? I was like, £300. And he was like, okay, cool, that's what I usually charge, let's do it. I was like, thank fuck for that. So anyway, I remember that would been a huge moment for me because I just didn't have the confidence to do any of these things. But this is what we need, because growth comes from uncomfortable situations. So these phone calls, me having to reach out to models and influencers and all these things, this is what helped me grow my confidence. I was only 21, 22 at the time, and I was reaching out to these guys, and I also arranged the photo shoot, started to build my coaching program, and that's when I really started planning my weeks. So I separated my environments. I had my bedroom and then the spare room in my mum and dad's house. I go through to the spare room, which was basically an office. I remember I had a sheet of paper, just the normal size of paper. I'd split it into 7 categories, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all the way to Sunday, and I'd just write a to-do list every day. What do I need to get done these days? That's how I plan my weeks. That's what my preparation and my productivity looked like. I'd literally write it on a sheet of paper and I'd tick through as much as I could get done. That's how I plan my weeks, and that's when I first started planning my weeks. So that was another aspect of my self-improvement that started. I started separating my environments, started planning my weeks. One of the big things that I'd done was I removed self-limiters from my life. So at this time, I was like, right, I'm building this brand. I need more time. Because I'm working at the same time. I was back working as a personal trainer, building this brand at the same time. It's like, where do I get this time from? So I audited my time. I looked and I was like, right, where am I wasting time? So I'm wasting my time going out when I have no real intention, like going to the pub for no reason. So I stopped doing that as much, like literally barely any times. I was playing Xbox for like 2-3 hours by myself half the time, wasted time. I would be doom scrolling, and I always remember Snapchat and Facebook. I'd look through stories and whatever, and I remember thinking, like, what the fuck is this doing for me? It's doing nothing. I was part of 1 or 2 group chats, but I even thought, like, what do these group chats do for me, apart from distract me? They do nothing. So I deleted those apps. I've never downloaded Snapchat since. I've not had it since I was about 20, 21, 22, whatever age I was. Facebook I download probably once a month just to see if there's like anything on it in terms of like anybody's reach out to me or anything like that, and then I delete it again because those were distractions. I sold my Xbox because I was spending 2 or 3 hours a day on it, and I thought that's the time I could put into my business. Now, just to highlight the importance of that, I played my Xbox almost every single day of my life from about the age of 11 years old up until 20, 21, 22. And then I sold it. And I've never bought one since. I've barely ever played one since. And it's been one of the best things I've ever done. So I talk about this with my clients. I tell this to you in the podcast all the time. One of the biggest things we can do for our own improvement is remove self-limiters. You can see all the things that I preach all the time is what I was going through at the time. Now, I didn't know this. I didn't know that I was removing self-limiters. I didn't know that I was auditing my time. I was just doing these things because I thought it was the right idea. Because I'd listen to an audiobook, I'd hear the suggestion, and I would do it. And now I've obviously structured all of this, and this is how I deliver it to my clients. But yeah, that was the beginning of me really planning and taking action of things. Now, obviously I launched my clothing brand. I worked with some cool kind of athletes and influencers that really grew my confidence because I had to reach out to people. This was really the start of some of my biggest failures. I spent about 2.5, 3, 4, well, it totaled about $5,000 in stock, but my first drop was about $2,500. And every single drop that I ordered of 50 to 100 hoodies or t-shirts or caps, they all came with problems. If you've never been in, which most of you won't have obviously had a clothing brand before, it is so difficult to get things nailed in the early stages because you're working with Chinese manufacturers, Turkish manufacturers, Pakistan, all these places, and there's a language barrier. You use these things called CADs, which are computer-aided designs. It's very simple, which is what you want, measurements, all of these things, notes. And every single time I ordered, they always came with problems. I would approve the last sample, I'm like, this is great. And then guess what? They would send me $2,000 worth of clothes and there'd be mistakes. The sizing would be wrong, it'd be from a previous sample, one of the stitching wouldn't be right, the colours would be faded. Fucking nightmare. When you've invested literally your only savings into a brand and you want this to come out so perfect and it comes and it's wrong, I've waited like 6 months for this, for the design process, sampling, then like 8 weeks for the bulk order to come, and then it comes and it's fucked. That was like, these were some big kind of harsh lessons for me, but this is business and that's what it taught me. Now at this time I realised that I was in the wrong game. I was in the fashion game. I'm not fashion is not my passion. That rhymes, that's cool. Branding was what I loved. I loved branding, I love business, but not fashion. So this was a harsh reality for me. I've invested all this money in a business and inevitably it's not where I want to take my life. So obviously at some stage I had to shut that down. So for the next few years when I go back to personal training, I continued to build my brand. My clothing brand was clearly failing, so eventually I shut it down. Now in that time through personal training, I started creating content, which was a huge thing for me. I'm sitting in front of this camera talking to you. I don't know, I've probably been talking for 20, 30 minutes right now. I can talk for this period of time full of confidence, full of conviction, because I have created content for years. I've spent years talking to a camera. Now, if you imagine talking to a camera, it probably gives you the fear. You're probably like, oh my God, what would people think of me? I'll hate the sound of my own voice. I'll be so uncomfortable. I'll be really shit at it. I was all of those things. But I just done it enough to get over that fear. And now I actually enjoy it. So this was a huge thing for me, was starting to create content. Now, something that inevitably changed my life, I'd mentioned to you I was part of a group called the Young Entrepreneurs Network, a networking group. So if we fast forward a few years to where we are just now, from when I first joined it, I was still part of it. So this was about 2-3 years at the time. There was a guy in that, a friend of mine called Scott, and Scott had said to me, basically we had these weekly focus groups, so I started to build friends with these guys in business, which was amazing. And one of these guys, Scott, said to me, listen, I'm recording content. I basically go into a podcast studio, I record it, and I just cut up the clips. I don't even release the episode, I just use it for content. He's like, do you want to do it with me? I was like, fuck, I'd love that. So basically me and him went into a podcast studio, we spoke about life, we spoke about the things we wanted to speak about, and we cut up the clips and we released them. When I done that, it was my first time ever in front of a podcast camera, and I loved it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm actually quite good at this. I can talk in front of a camera. I have a lot of value to give. My friend John from the YEN podcast, he invited me on. They had also the networking group and the podcast. He invited me on. So I was a guest on a podcast. I remember my brother messaged me after it and he's like, oh my God, like this is amazing. You're doing so well. And that was like, all these people reached out to me and I was like, wow, I'm actually pretty good at this. So that obviously then led to me eventually starting this podcast. But that was a really big moment for me because what it done for me was made me think of my vision. So I realised that I recorded this podcast episode. I was like, right, I want to be better at this. I want to be a good speaker. I want to be able to inspire people through words. I want to be able to encourage people to take action through knowledge. I want to equip people with these things. I want to be more articulate. I wanted all of these things. Then I started thinking about what more do I want? I want to be disciplined. I want to be a reflection of the type of man that people want to be. Disciplined, consistent, optimistic. So that gave me more willpower, more firepower, to be like, right, okay, what do I want to do with my life? Now, because I wanted to be more disciplined and I wanted to come across as this guy, I genuinely wanted to be this guy, I started something called high performance days, which is where once per week, I committed to waking up at 4 a.m. I went out a run, it only took me 15 minutes. I would come back, I would sit there and I would do some gratitude outside, and I'd go inside, I'd get to work in the business before going into the gym to start work with clients at 6 a.m. Now, the reason I started doing this high performance day once per week, I'd done it for almost 2 years. The reason I'd done that was to practice discipline. I hated getting up early. I was never an early riser. So getting up at 4 a.m, I struggled to get up at like 5:45 to get into the gym for 6 to work with clients. So this changed my life, because once per week I used to get the fear the night before, I could barely sleep, and then my alarm would go up and I'd get a fright, and I'd get up and I'd just do it anyway, because my vision was strong enough. Because through all of this experience of me recording a podcast with somebody, me being in this networking group and being around these types of people, I realised I want to be disciplined. I want to be consistent. I want to be someone that people can look to and think, that guy's inspiring. And to do that, I had to live like him. So I started these high performance days. And ever since then, I've been a morning person. So it took me about 8 months of doing them until I really started to get used to it. And then ever since then, like, I've woke up early. You could ask me to wake up at 3 a.m. tomorrow. Don't care. It's fine. Like, my perception of time now has totally shifted. There is no time on that clock that's too early or too late. As long as I get my sleep, I don't care what time I go to sleep or what time I wake up, I'll do it. So it changed my whole perception of time, which is a really interesting subject I'd like to speak more about at some day. But this is really when I started to live a life by design. I started doing these high performance days to be more disciplined. I started thinking like how I want my life to look. So I'd done that for years. And then if we get to the stage where I was 24 years old, still doing my high performance days, I started this podcast. So it'll be coming up in January. In about 5 months' time, it'll be 3 years since I've started this podcast. I'd been in self-improvement for years at the time. I wanted to start an online coaching business at the time because all the work I'd put in had led me to build out this vision for the future. And I knew that I was capable of providing more value, not just in a gym training people to help them lose weight, but I knew I could provide a service online and I could reach more people and I could impact people in a different way, especially through all this self-improvement knowledge I was learning. So started to obviously continue with that. I'd been in self-improvement for years now, started this podcast, started my online coaching business. So clothing brand was shutting down at the time, was still running my personal training business, which was going great. At the time I was working about 35 hours a week with clients directly. I had about 30 clients at the time. My online coaching business I started, I had like 4 or 5 clients for the first probably 6 months. So I was running both of them side by side. And that made me start to realize what I want to do in my life. Like, I want to continue to be disciplined. I want to really live a life that I can be proud of. I want to be able to travel one day. I want to have a business that I can be proud of. I wanted all these things. Now, on that discipline note, one of the things I committed to doing was the David Goggins 4x4x48 challenge, which is where you run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. At the time, I wasn't a runner. I started the high performance days. I ran once per week for 15 minutes. So I'd been doing them for probably close to a year at the time, and I committed to this challenge. So I gave myself a few weeks to train for it, and I'd done it. I ran 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. I raised, how much did I raise for charity? I think it was over £1,000. Then I donated a good chunk of my own money to that charity as well, which is something I'm really proud of that I'd done. And basically I started to be like, oh my God, I'm actually doing the things I say I'm going to do. I'm wanting to become disciplined, and I'm doing the things required. I want to be consistent, I'm doing the things required. I want to be an optimist, I'm doing the things required. I've been practicing gratitude, getting up early, doing my workouts, working on the business, working on my mind for years now. So for years, I'd been constantly improving. My pursuit of constant improvement was in full flow. Now, if we fast forward to 25 years old, which was only last year, I'm talking literally a year ago just now, maybe 14 months ago, my personal training business was going well. Again, 35 clients, making good money each month. I'd probably sitting about 8 clients from online business. So that was going well as well. So income was good. But I was stuck. I was in a town that I grew up in and then had a mortgage. So I was in a relationship at the time for 9 years. So I'd been with this girl for 9 years. We had a good relationship by all accounts. Was working a job. I was very comfortable. I was living a good life, making good money, had a good relationship, had a really nice flat. I was in a town which was relatively nice, but it wasn't what I wanted. I looked at the 3 most important decisions you will ever make in your life, which are what you choose to do for a living, where you choose to live, and who you choose to marry, your life partner. I looked at those 3 things and they just didn't feel right. I was like, I want more. I want different things from this. So over a couple month period, I made radical changes in my life. Me and my girlfriend split up. I decided that I was going to leave the gym that I was working in. I was never going to go back to personal training, and I was going to commit to going all in on my online coaching business. That then meant that I had the time and location freedom that I also craved. I craved this for years. So this was the first step of me really building out this dream life, this life by design, of being able to live in places like Bali, Thailand, train Muay Thai every day, meet incredible people. This was the life that I wanted to. And as I said, it all came from those 3 big decisions. So my life was good, but it wasn't what I wanted. I was living by default. I was doing what other people probably wanted for me, what other people thought was a good life. But that wasn't what I wanted, so I made those changes. So again, not living in a time that I grew up of. I wanted more freedom. I wanted to live in abundance. I wanted a relationship that was everything that I ever envisioned and more. Someone that I absolutely adore and they adore me. Our life and our values align perfectly. I say perfectly, nothing is ever perfect in life. But all these things had to align. There's a quote that I love from Naval Ravikant. He says, "A fit body, a calm mind, and a house full of love. These things cannot be bought, they must be earned." And that's what I want from life. I've got the fit body, I've built the calm mind, I wanted this house full of love, I wanted this relationship, I wanted this someone that I wanted to build a family with, all these things. Now, over the past year of my life, I've done a ton of learning. Obviously, my first time in 9-10 years since I was 15 years old being single, had a lot of learning to do, which was interesting. I'll say a year of that. I met an absolutely unbelievable woman who I'm so blessed to be with. I made friends that I will be friends with probably for the rest of my life, people who have shown me different perspectives in life, and I experienced life living at the other side of the world. So of course I went all in with my online coaching business. I moved to Thailand for 3 months. This is where all this happened. In that 3 months in Thailand, I trained more Muay Thai than I've ever trained before, so I became a better fighter than I've ever been. I grew in confidence more because I lived myself for 3 months. I met a ton of new people from every part of the world you can ever imagine. Yeah, I just had incredible experiences. I had a buzz cut. If you've never seen me with my buzz cut before or not with a buzz cut, go back and watch my old episodes. I used to have longer hair. I looked like a child. As silly as it sounds, that buzz cut was like a huge moment for me, because what it does is it allows me, I appear more authoritative now. I just look more like a guy that you'd listen to rather than a 12-year-old boy. So that's been a big moment in my life. I came home from that time in Thailand, and again, my pursuit was fucking all in as ever. I committed to new things I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn more public speaking. So I went to classes on public speaking. I wanted to learn how to dance. So I went to bachata classes, which is Latin dance, and that opened up so many opportunities in my life. Had some fucking cool experiences off the back of that. I love it. It's so fun. That networking group that I told you that I've been part of for almost 5 years, I now work with them as the head coach. So that was once a group that I was part of. The members in it were some of my closest friends, people I admired so much. Now I'm a coach. I'm the head coach of that company. Wild. Something I could have never imagined. I run a business with 2 of my best friends. 2 of the guys I admire most on this planet. My friendships, my relationship, my mind, my body, my business are in places that I could never have once imagined. And I mean that. And I'm sure you can hear that from my voice. All of this came from my pursuit of constant improvement. It all came from those big decisions. So if you're going to take anything from this episode and apply it to your own life, it would be that. Those 3 big decisions. Where you choose to live, who you choose to marry, and what you choose to do for a living. Those are the 3 things that impact you more than anything. And that, I genuinely believe, is why I'm living such a good life. Because it may sound egotistical, but this is the truth. I have the most incredible friends I'm so proud to be part of. I'm friends with business owners that have businesses doing millions of pounds per year. I have a relationship which I absolutely adore. I built a body that was better than anybody I ever thought I could build. I have a mindset, I'm more disciplined, more consistent than I ever thought I ever could be. As I said, this sounds egotistical. The reason I'm saying this is because this is what I wanted when I was younger. I wanted to be around business owners doing incredible things. Like really cool businesses, making cool amounts of money. I can provide value to these people. I coach these people. But how crazy is that? Imagine telling 15-year-old Connor who's just failed his exams, he's failed business. Imagine telling him, you're going to coach business owners, 7-figure per year business owners. You're going to coach them. You're going to help them, guide them in their life. You're going to help change their life. It's fucking nuts. That's what I do today. It's wild. I never believed this was possible. And again, all this comes from living a life by design. I was once shy. Now I'm confident. I'm full of conviction. I once failed at business. Now I'm thriving in it. All of these things came from my pursuit of constant improvement. Another thing as well, like literally I never even mentioned that at the start of this year, once I went home, when I started learning public speaking, I started working for the Uncommon, I started doing my bachata classes, I also started getting guests on my podcast. I interviewed professional fighters, people that I once looked up to. I followed them on Instagram, thought these guys are cool as fuck. I'm friends with some of them now. Like, the reason I'm telling you this is because see all the things that you envision, all the things that you're like, oh my God, that'd be so cool to live. It's fucking possible. Like, I was the shy, unconfident boy who failed in school. And now I'm living a life that I could have never once imagined. And that all came from living a life by design, living with intention, trusting the process. This has took me 8 years. This hasn't come in a year or 2 years. I've failed more times than most people. So, yeah, that's my story. I've gone from a position where I'm now living a life where 16-year-old, 15-year-old me would have dreamed of. And yeah, I couldn't be more proud of that. The last thing I want to finish with is just a little explanation of something in terms of changing your life. If this is something you want to do and you really want to radically change your life, it happens in set stages. First comes conflict, then comes interest, then comes awareness, then we make change. Now let me explain that. Conflict we often see as a bad thing. Maybe you're in a relationship that maybe you're not meant to be in it, conflict will arise. Maybe you're in a position in life you don't want to be in, conflict will arise. You're like, fuck, I don't like this, whatever, this is happening and I don't like it. See, that conflict, it sparks interest. And like, fuck, maybe more is out there for me. Maybe I'm capable of more. After that interest comes awareness. You become aware of what's possible. Oh, I could do this, I could do that. Then comes change. That's where most people stop. They have the awareness that a better life is possible, but they aren't willing to put in the work and make the changes. And that's the reality of it. If you want to live a life that you can be proud of, you have to be willing to make the changes you need to make. And that is what I'll leave you with for today. So the fact that you've listened to all this, I genuinely appreciate. I appreciate you listening to this. I appreciate you hearing about my story. I hope you enjoy that. I hope there's some value in this for you. As ever, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I cannot wait to speak to you again in the next episode of The Pursuit of Constant Improvement. Thank you for listening.